Hey, the feds are interviewing my close friends and associates. Perhaps if the authorities arrive, BuzzFeed may be wise to immediately request legal counsel before any conversations or interviews about our news gathering practices or related journalism issues. Also, I'm on to a big story and need to go off the radar for a bit. All the best, and hope to see you all soon. Michael. That email was sent Monday, June the 17th, and by Tuesday, June the 18th, Michael Hastings was dead. Who was Michael Hastings? Michael was an award-winning investigative journalist who worked for Newsweek, BuzzFeed, Rolling Stone magazine, and a contributor to several other news organizations. Michael was probably best known for an article that was printed in Rolling Stone magazine back in 2010 concerning General Stanley McChrystal. That name may sound familiar because that story was pretty big in the States. The story didn't shine General McChrystal in a good light, and the general eventually had to step down after meeting with President Obama. Hastings' reporting was praised in some circles, but for the most part, he was blasted for exposing what he did, especially by fellow journalists. Hastings later said that he felt the heat from all angles, including staff members from McChrystal who ended up sending death threats to him. Hastings regularly stood up to the establishment, and it's probably safe to say that he didn't have very many friends at the Pentagon. His last article before his death was titled, "Why Democrats Love to Spy on Americans." He was closely watching and reporting on the recent news stories that were coming out about the spying that the NSA has been doing and the going after of journalists that this administration has been doing. So how did he die? Michael died at 4:30 a.m. in Los Angeles. He just happened to be filmed by a reporter who had a dash cam turned on at this time in the morning. He was sitting in a parking lot, and his dash cam caught Hastings driving through a red light in his Mercedes C250 coupe, which has been described as being a brand new vehicle. An eyewitness says he saw the Mercedes traveling at the fastest speed, traveling through the neighborhood with sparks or fire coming out from under the car before the vehicle lost control and crashed into a tree that was in the middle of the road. Now, a lot of people are pointing to this and saying, look at this, there was sparks coming out before the car even crashed. But bear in mind, if the car is traveling at a very fast speed and it's low to the ground, it's more than likely hitting some dips, and I'm sure you've seen it before. Cars, whenever they scrape the ground, they'll throw up sparks. So this in and of itself doesn't mean a whole lot. One witness claims that she heard what sounded like a, quote, bomb going off. Her house and windows shook. The car was then captured on film by the same reporter who was sitting in the parking lot. He said it just happened to be that he was leaving, heard the call come in, made a turn, and there was the wreckage. So he got to see the car before it crashed and then after the crash. But even though the alleged reporter showed up on the scene just shortly after the car crashed, by the time the reporter showed up, the car was already engulfed in flames. The engine flew out 50 yards. Some say that it flew out even further. The body so badly damaged that the coroner had to use dental records in order to identify it. And it was reported that the accident took place less than 5 minutes from Michael's home. The fast conclusion is you just simply dismiss this as a person who was up really late at night or really early in the morning, however you want to look at it, who may be drunk or on drugs, who was just speeding, lost control, wrecked the vehicle, died, end of story right there. And that is entirely possible. But given his background, given the stories that are in the news about this administration going after reporters, going after leakers harder than any other administration previously, given his emails to friends just hours prior to his death, given the fact that WikiLeaks tweeted out immediately after the news of his death broke and said, quote, Michael Hastings contacted WikiLeaks lawyer just a few hours before he died, saying that the FBI was investigating him. One of Michael's closest friends, Sergeant Joe Biggs, who he met while on tour in Afghanistan, also said that this looks very suspicious. He said Michael was very paranoid in the days leading up to his death, especially after the story started breaking about the NSA listening in and the wiretapping of journalists. He was convinced that he was being followed. Sergeant Joe Biggs says this was out of character for Michael. He said the Michael that he knew was fearless. Here's some questions. 1. Did Michael receive a phone call that morning to make him be out on the road at that time? And this is something that investigators can easily track and locate, so hopefully we'll hear more about this information and they can look at that. Also, I'd like to hear from Mercedes for their explanation of how their brand new Mercedes can be engulfed in flames in under 2 minutes from a crash and their engine fly at least 50 yards, it appears, after hitting a tree. His friends say that he drove like a grandma, and driving erratically at 4:30 a.m. doesn't necessarily fit with the profile of someone who is, quote, needing to go off the radar for a bit. And the biggest question that I have is, what huge story did he have on the CIA that he was working on? Did you know that today's cars are some of the safest on the road? Onboard computer systems, especially ones like those found in high-end vehicles like Mercedes, have numerous safety features built into them. And of course, if you're going at a high rate of speed, no computer is going to save you from an impact. But there's a flip side to that coin. While onboard computers offer amazing safety and convenience features, they also make you vulnerable to attacks, to hacking specifically. And no, this isn't some tinfoiled hat conspiracy. It's been proven numerous times. PBS actually has a video on this. It's easy to hack a modern automobile. Just last year, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency that I've told you about, had a conference where a lady talked about how easy it was to hack into a vehicle and take full control of it. The computers control everything in a car: acceleration, braking, and even steering. This woman mentioned using the Bluetooth system to hack in, or a diagnostic port. You could even, put in a CD in the system. If somebody didn't know, then they could have full control over your car at that point. And at no time does a person who is hacking have to physically touch the car. It can all be done remotely. And what's even more disturbing is former U.S. National Coordinator for Security, Infrastructure Protection, and Counterterrorism expert Richard Clarke told the Huffington Post that what is known about the single vehicle car crash, talking about Michael Hastings, he said, quote, is consistent with a car cyber attack, end quote. Now, this guy worked for Ronald Reagan, George H. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. He worked in all their administrations. He's been involved with the nation's top secrets for decades, and he even considers the fact that this is a possibility that can't be ruled out. But I do want to stress, this could be nothing more than a common wreck with a lot of coincidences, with a lot of freak nature stuff just happening. It is possible. And I'm not saying that sarcastically whatsoever. I mean that. This could be just a legitimate wreck. Maybe Michael was being reckless. Maybe he was speeding. But considering the circumstances, one thing is for certain. I think it's absolutely an understatement to say that this needs to be investigated with the utmost careful attention to detail. And not just investigated like a normal car crash, but investigated to rule out any foul play whatsoever. And that means attempting to look as far as bomb residue and complete inspection of the onboard computer systems if there's anything left. And see if there's any way also to look at deleted files, because programs can tell themselves to delete. Sadly, if Michael Hastings was assassinated and if this was a conspiracy, we may never know. Richard Clarke, he also said the following: if there was a cyber attack on the car, and I'm not saying there was, I think whoever did it would probably get away with it. So apparently, these things are pretty easy to pull off without leaving much evidence. I do hope that more journalists will at least have the courage to continue where Michael left off. Ask the tough questions even if it's not popular. Seek to tell the truth. We need to have private investigators looking at this, and not just the LAPD and the feds. And remember him by making sure that his death was indeed just an accident. In one of his final appearances on TV, Michael Hastings said the following: "The Obama administration has clearly declared war on the press. It's a war on investigative journalists, our sources. I think the only recourse to this kind of behavior by the government is to say back to the government, we declare war on you. And from this point forward, we should no longer as a media as a whole cooperate in any matter with the government in terms of when we are doing national security stories. It's a free press. It's not a free except when the government tells me to do it press. We've been way too easygoing with these guys. We let them get away with it for years. We let them tell us what to print, what not to print. And I say be done with it. And everyone should just get together and fire back, because no one else is going to protect the press." Michael Hastings was willing to stand to protect the press.